we do know that the retrial of Karen Reed has officially come to an end. I want to put up some video for you just as she was spotted out for the first time today. This is some of this video footage that we have from Fox News Digital. She was spotted out and about, appearing to dump off a few of those boxes as well. But again, this is the first time that she was seen. This is some exclusive video that we have from Fox News Digital. This is all fresh off her gripping murder acquittal. She was spotted easing back into everyday life as well. So some of these images of her were there grabbed as she's wearing a white t-shirt and black leggings. So of course, this again came just 2 days after she was acquitted in the death of her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Jurors found Karen Reed not guilty of second-degree murder, which was the top charge in this case, but guilty of a lesser offense of operating a vehicle under the influence with a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or greater. This trial, though, saw more than 30 days of testimony and 4 days of deliberation. Reed was also found not guilty of driving manslaughter and fleeing the scene of a deadly accident. Do want to now to continue to discuss what's to come next, as this is not quite the end for Karen Reed. I want to bring into the conversation legal analyst Dwane Cates. Dwane, thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now.
For having me on.
All right, let's start with the very basics. This has been a trial that has gripped the entire nation. People have been tuned into this for several years because this isn't the first trial. We know the first one ended in a mistrial. Now, a year later, Karen Reed was found not guilty on that major charge, second-degree murder.
I mean, the first trial was a hung jury. The jury couldn't decide whether she was guilty or not guilty of the main charge. They added the DUI charge for the second case. And, she was found not guilty. I mean, the jury just didn't believe that she did what the prosecutor said.
And so as we're talking about some of this, and we do know that Karen Reed has had many supporters, but we're hearing for the first time as well from some of those jurors who were involved in the case, and they were the ones who were ultimately in charge of deciding whether or not Karen would be convicted on these very serious charges. Let's first start with what we've been hearing from a woman named juror number 11. She was speaking on the fact that she didn't quite believe everything that the prosecution was saying. She also talked about how she found some of the witnesses to not be credible. When we were listening into this, is this sort of typical? Did you expect any of this to come out after this trial has been over? Did you expect any of this information to come out as the juror was speaking on what she did or didn't believe from the prosecution?
Oh, I thought you were going to play a song from the juror. No, jurors always have a really interesting perspective in trial, and they look at things differently. But I was just talking with my partner the other day, my law partner, and he's in a big trial, and we were talking, and if you tell the jurors if they have to figure out what happened, then the prosecution failed, because their job isn't to figure out what happened. Their job, the prosecution has to prove what happened. They shouldn't be left to figure it out. And if you're back in the jury room and you're having to try to figure out what happened, then it's a not guilty verdict.
And so we're playing out some of those moments as well here, just some video of what happened in court. But again, this all centers around the Boston police officer, John O'Keefe, who was found dead while lying in the snow as well. So, and for the first time since things have wrapped, we know that Karen has been very forthcoming. She's been speaking to the media, even had an entire documentary that came out after the first mistrial there and leading into this trial, which some of that evidence was used in court in this time around. But for the first time, we saw an outside sit-down interview with the owners of the home where John O'Keefe was found. They sat down with some of those other top news outlets, speaking on their remarks, saying that they believe that the justice system got this one wrong. And so is it interesting to hear for them for the first time outside of the context of court? Brian Albert, Jen McCabe, some of those folks speaking out and sitting down.
Well, it's a little surprising because the death happened at their home, which puts them and they were having a party at their home, and it puts them at some risk to be swept up into a big civil case. And there is a big civil case going on. And, but it's not surprising because 50% of the country thought she was not guilty. 50% of the country thought she was guilty. There was a big divide, and there were a lot of people in both camps.
And so let's talk about that civil case that is currently ongoing. And so, again, like we said, this isn't the end of the road for Karen Read, although she may not be liable criminally at this point. What's to come with her civil trial?
Well, it's just like the O.J. Simpson case. He was acquitted at trial, but then he was found responsible in a wrongful death suit. And there's a wrongful death suit in this case. The burdens of proof are different. In the criminal court, they have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that she caused the death and had some state of mind that led to it. In a civil case, it's just got to be 51%. It's just got to be more likely than not she was responsible for the death. And so a civil jury could see this totally different because there is a huge difference in the burden of proof.
And let's talk about it because we know that there is beyond a reasonable doubt versus just 51% in a civil case. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's just when you weigh the evidence that you think it's more likely that she was responsible than she wasn't. I mean, it's that simple. And so it's a lot easier to win a civil case than it is to win a criminal case.
All right. And so as we continue to see the emotion that Karen Read also put out, we do have to point out that she was found guilty on just one charge. This was called OUI there in the Commonwealth. But what this is considered to be is basically driving under the influence. I've been reading some reports about the amount of money that this case cost ultimately to prosecute over both cases. And just to come up with an OUI or a driving under the influence charge has been interesting. What are your thoughts on how maybe folks are going to be continuing to view some of these high profile cases in this sense?
They didn't even have that charge in the first trial. Okay. And so they added it for the second trial, and I guess they got a conviction. But again, the state really doesn't care how much money and how many resources they spend on a case. Okay, it's not their money. Okay, they don't have to go home and get their checkbook out and write a check. Okay, where criminal defendants do. And that's the issue is that Karen Read spent millions and millions of dollars on her defense that hopefully the documentary does well enough that she can pay off her lawyers. But it's always tough. The state loses some cases. I mean, they do. But that's what the system is built for. The system is designed to have an adversarial a trial where you can test the evidence and a jury of your peers gets to decide whether or not you're guilty. And that's just the way the system works.
So ultimately, once the civil trial is behind Karen, is that officially closing the door? Could she potentially be brought up in any new charges if they were to reopen this case?
Well, she couldn't be brought up with any new charges that had to do with the events of that night. There's double jeopardy. They've had their shot at prosecuting her for that incident, and they failed. And so that's it. That's it for the criminal charges. Now, if there was something else that's an outlier, I think they would have brought any charges they thought they possibly had that they could bring in this trial, and they can't bring any lesser included charges or anything like that. So they're kind of just stuck with the result, and they're just going to move on. And this happens every day. I mean, people get acquitted every day of crimes, and it's the people say, oh, the system failed. No, the system didn't fail. The system worked exactly the way it was supposed to. A jury of her peers heard the evidence and found her not guilty.
And Dwane, before I let you go, there have been also a lot of calls online for the case to be reopened to look at other possible suspects now that Karen Read was acquitted on this pretty big second-degree murder charge. Again, this was a Boston police officer. This is someone that many people in the community respected. Do you believe that this investigation could possibly be reopened?
Part of the problem with that is just like the O.J. Simpson case. O.J. was going to find the killer. In this case, they truly believed that it was her and she was responsible for it. So in order to go out and reopen the investigation and do everything, they basically have to admit that they were wrong. Okay, and if they do find the true person, then she may have a lawsuit against the city or the county or the state, because again, if they did such a shoddy investigation that they missed the true killer, so I will almost guarantee you there will be no investigation. They're just going to close the books on this. They're going to say, we found the person, we charged her, she was found not guilty, this case is closed.
And so I think that's important to point out. So do you think she does currently have a path to finding out or to being able to sue?
I really don't. The municipalities and governments have what's called qualified immunity. Okay. And so if she found out that the police department actually did set her up and she could prove it, then she'd have a lawsuit, but that's really hard to prove.
All right. So again, those were some of the moments as Karen Read left the courthouse there in Dedham, Massachusetts, after, again, getting off. She was found not guilty of second-degree murder. Ultimately, she walks away with a conviction simply on OUI, which is essentially driving under the influence. And we appreciate Dwane Cates for being with us here, a legal analyst, to help us break down the very latest in this trial. As we still look ahead, there's a civil case going on, so the conversation around Karen Read not quite put to an end. I appreciate you for joining us, though, here on Live Now.
Thank you for having me.
All right, wanted to get that update in for you here on Live Now from Fox. Let's go ahead, though, and listen into some of these comments that Karen Read made outside of the courthouse in the wake of her not guilty verdict. Let's listen in.
I just want to say two things. Number one is I could not be standing here without these amazing supporters who have supported me and my team financially and, more importantly, emotionally for almost 4 years. And the second thing I want to say is no one has fought harder for justice for John O'Keefe than I have and my team. Thank you.
So you want to see it reopened? Karen, you want to see the case reopened? Give a message. Should the case be reopened?
No, the case cannot be reopened.
Alan,
this case is over.
No, I mean, the case is larger for someone else. What does this say? Just what does it say about justice?
I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it to Karen and her dad. Her dad has a comment. Let her dad make a comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Reed.
I want to acknowledge the strength of our daughter Karen, the support of the entire Reed extended family. I want to acknowledge the greatest team of attorneys. Our first one that we found was David Yannetti. We added Alan Jackson and Liza Little. Bob Alessi, you know about. All right. It was a fantastic team, but we needed them all to defeat this. We thank everybody for their support from the heart. We love you all of the content providers who help spread the word. Thank you so much. God bless you all. The investigation.
Let's do this.
You can just hear the roar of supporters who are outside of the courtroom there in Dedham, Massachusetts, earlier this week on Wednesday, as Karen Read was officially found not guilty on second-degree murder. Heard those remarks there from Karen Read herself, alongside her father, who's been there supporting her every step of the way during this trial. Wanted to bring you these updates here on Live Now from Fox.